Hi, I'm Dr. Robin, and I love answering questions. And so, current students at Dr. Robin School can submit their questions directly in the curriculum, and then I answer them here. So, this one is fun. It's from Ursula, who is wondering, can big chunks of food ever accidentally end up in your blood and then block your veins? Well, this is a great question. And we really have to go into what happens in our digestive system. So, when you eat your food, you chew it up, you swallow it. If you've ever had something yucky in your mouth, like a bone or something, and you spat it back out, which I hope you don't normally do, but you've seen it kind of forms a mushy ball of spitty, chewed up stuff, that's called a bolus. And your tongue and your spit and your teeth work together to make like a little ball. Then you swallow it. The next step is in your stomach, it gets all mushed up with stomach acid and some enzymes. Enzymes are things that help break down your food. The enzymes in your stomach just start the process. They don't do very much. They just start breaking down big chunks of protein into little chunks of protein, but it's still protein. Otherwise, not much happens. It just becomes barf or vomit or throw up or whatever you call the stuff that comes out when you're sick. That is what your stomach does. It takes perfectly good food and it makes barf. Now, when I was a kid, I remember so clearly being told that your stomach digests your food. And I didn't learn that you had a small intestine until I was in high school. And I was stunned that your stomach does not digest your food. And then I realized, yeah, when you throw up, that is not digested food. We don't want barf feeding your brain or going to your fingers and your muscles, right? That's gross. So it has a little bit more work left to do. In your small intestine, that's where the food is digested the rest of the way. Now, here's the key. How do we get the food around our body? Well, it's in our blood, right? How do we get our food into our blood? It has to go through cells. Because remember, we are made of cells. Cells are the building blocks of life. So everything in our body is made of cells, including the lining of our small intestine. So imagine for a minute that you spilled some soup on the floor. Let's say it was like a vegetable soup with like potatoes and carrots and peas and things like that. Now you could take a washcloth and soak up the liquid part into that washcloth, right? Would the potatoes and carrots and things soak up? No, it would not. So what you're doing with that washcloth is absorbing the liquid, right? You can't absorb the chunks. They're stuck outside. That's because the cloth can't absorb chunks. They're too big. Our cells are much, much, much smaller than that cloth. And something really interesting has to happen. The little bits of the food you digested have to actually go through the cells, right? Because that's the thing that you're absorbing through. And it's not just a matter of like catching it on the outside. If you've ever cleaned up soup, you pick up the cloth and there's all that icky stuff on there. It didn't actually go through the cloth to the other side. Maybe some of the liquid did, but all the icky stuff stayed on one side. It's kind of what happens in our poop too. All of the big stuff stays in our intestines. Only the really tiny stuff can come through. The reason why is because it has to go through the cells. The stuff that goes through the cells has to be really tiny. For example, you can't have proteins. You can't have complex carbohydrates. You can't have fats. Now, those are just basic nutrition, right? You actually have to break them down into smaller pieces. So you can't have a chunk of hamburger going around in your blood because you can't have protein or fat or carbohydrates. Instead, you break those up. This is a string of pop beads. It's not food, but it's a good way of talking about protein. Protein is made of amino acids. In order to actually fit into the cell and then through the other side and into your blood, let's take it apart into the individual amino acids. We can actually use pop beads to talk about sugar too. Even something as simple as lactose, the milk sugar, is still two sugars stuck together. That's still too big to fit through your cell. We actually have to break it down further into the individual sugars. Lactose is made of glucose plus galactose, two different sugars. So glucose can get through, or galactose can get through. But lactose is too big. That's how small things need to be. Fat has to be broken down into the pieces that make fat, which are called glycerol and fatty acids. So in the end, you don't just not have food. Because food has a lot of different stuff in it. A piece of cookie would have sugar, it would have protein, it would have all this different stuff in it. We can't even have those things. So we can't have the cookie. We can't have the sugar and protein the cookie's made out of. Instead, we have to have the amino acids and the individual, what are called monosaccharides or bits of sugar. The individual fatty acids, the individual little bits of everything, are the only things that can get absorbed through the wall of our small intestine into our blood. So in our blood, all we have are those itsy bitsy little things going around. And even the fatty acids are too big to go into our blood. So they get taken through a whole different system called our lymphatic system until they can get processed and made into something that our blood can handle. So that is why you will never find chunks of food floating around in someone's blood. If you have a question for me and you're a current student at Dr. Robin School, you can click on Ask Dr. Robin, where you can submit a question and I will answer your question.